Hey friends, it's me, Em again, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things sinister. If you're interested in true crime or if you like all things horror related, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. That way you can join me for some morbid conversation. And for today's chat, we are going to be doing another episode in what's turning out to be a very enjoyable series for me to work on. And that is the 5 photos with the disturbing or sinister backstories. So I think everybody in the true crime community is wildly familiar with Ed Gein. He has been the basis for many horror characters in the scary movie franchise, anyone from Buffalo Bill to Leatherface to Norman Bates. A large part of Gein's notoriety came from not only the actual act of murder, but the fact that he was known for exhuming graves and using the skin, bones, and body parts from the corpses to fashion anything from a full skin suit to lampshades, curtain ties, and belts. When police ended up searching his home, they would find a wide collection of evidence that would be taken from the home and logged, and this chair would be one piece of that evidence. While seemingly normal at first glance, if you look closer, you'll see that human skin was stretched to upholster the seat of this chair. He would end up being found competent to stand trial and would end up getting a guilty verdict for the murder of Bernice Warden. But rather than serving his sentence in an actual prison, he would later on be found to be insane and he would spend the rest of his life at a mental health care facility. And he would end up passing away at the age of 77 years old. When Jesse McBain and his girlfriend Patricia Mann got dressed up for a Valentine's Day dance together, they didn't realize that this photo would be the last picture of them taken together. They never would return home from that dance, and their roommates immediately suspected something was off, and they contacted the police. It was very out of the norm for either of them to stay out overnight, and unfortunately, their friends were right. Something horrible had happened to the couple. Days after their disappearance, the couple was found in the woods, hands tied behind their backs. Unfortunately, they were not only not alive when they were found, but instead they had quite literally been tortured to death. So police were never able to find out who had actually committed this crime, and to this day, this case remains unsolved. So I was very surprised when this photo came up in my research, and I think that's because this photo is so iconic that we have all seen it at some point within the last couple years. But I never knew the absolutely heartbreaking story behind the boy in this photo. The boy in this photo is Devonte Hart, and the photo was taken during a rally that was in protest to the death of Michael Brown Jr., a black man shot by the white police officer Darren Wilson on August 9th, 2014. Devonte was an adopted child of Jennifer Hart, who had also adopted several other children with her wife. Jennifer would end up under the eye of CPS when it was reported that she would withhold food from the children as punishment, and she would even end up being on probation for it. This caused the family to move around, but CPS would end up being involved in every state they moved to. In 2017, 3 years after this photo was taken, Devonte would end up going to neighbors with his sister, begging for food for his siblings and claiming that his mothers were both racist and abusive. This caused the neighbors to make a police report, and an investigation was opened on March 24th, 2018. Once again, the family would flee, but this time, Jennifer Hart would drive her wife and her 6 adopted children off a cliff with no survivors. Jennifer was drunk at the time of the incident, and her wife and children had drugs in their system that would cause them to be drowsy. 4 of those children would end up being recovered from the accident, 3 of which were found close to the car, and 1 would be found a few weeks later in the ocean. Sadly, Devonte Hurt would end up being one of the 2 children that was never found. So by now, I'm sure we're all familiar with this man, but just in case you aren't, this is a picture of Dennis Rader and his daughter at her college graduation. Rader, also known as BTK or Bind, Torture, Kill, had taken the lives of 10 women before he was caught. But rather than going into the details about the crimes that he committed, I'm going to be going into the details of how he was caught, and particularly how this picture relates to how he got caught. The catalyst to Rader's capture started with a floppy disk. Rader had been communicating with the police through the classifieds, and he had asked police if he would be able to send them a floppy disk, and if he did so, would it be untraceable? The police told him that they wouldn't be able to trace it, and Rader took them by their word. But the disk was traceable, and the police traced it back to Rader and a computer at Rader's church. Once they had their suspect, they compared DNA that they had found at the crime scenes, and they were able to definitively say that Dennis Rader was in fact BTK. But how did they have his DNA? And how does this picture relate? Well, this picture is a picture taken of his daughter, Carrie, at her graduation from college. She would end up having a pap smear at that college's medical clinic, and it would be there that the police would obtain her DNA and use it to compare to the DNA from the crime scenes. They would obviously find a familial match confirming her father, Dennis Rader, as their guy. Now, originally, Carrie was upset that they had obtained her medical records without her consent, and she had even said, had they asked for it, she would have given them her DNA. I expect her emotions were honestly really high, and I'm not even sure how I would handle finding out that the man who raised me would end up being one of the most world-renowned serial killers, at least of her lifetime. So right here we have a picture of 2 girlfriends who decided to go on a enjoyable beach vacation together. And this picture is a picture of them at the start of that vacation. On April 1st, 2014, Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon vanished after going on a hike in the jungle. 10 weeks after they disappeared, a woman found a blue backpack belonging to Lisanne. Inside, they found the girls' cell phones and camera. It appears that something happened not long after they started that hike. Both girls' cell phones had showed that each of the girls attempted to reach both Dutch and Panamanian police officers dozens of times starting around 4:39 p.m. But because the reception in the jungle was so subpar, they were not actually able to make contact with anyone. Lisa's phone finally powered off on the 5th, and Chris's would power off a few days later on the 11th. We have since confirmed that both girls did end up losing their lives in the jungle, as we have found partial remains of both girls, but as far as what happened, that honestly remains a mystery to this day. Okay, friends, thank you again for joining me for another episode in this series of strange, unusual, or sinister photos. Remember, if there are any photos that you have that you would like to submit, my email is always listed down in the description box down below. Feel free to send me any pictures or descriptions of pictures that you may have, and I might use them in the next story. Until then, though, guys, it's always been fun, and like I always say, take care, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later, all right? Bye.